Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. Do not adjust your sets. This is not a pre-recorded show. The date is the 26th of July. It is Wednesday, and we got a big guest today. Like really, in my top 3 guests of all time, Dr. Jed Baker is going to be joining us in about 20 minutes on the show, and I am Twitter-pated. Very, very excited. But I am continuing to do the show at home because we have people in the house with COVID. You know what I'm saying? And so we're doing this distance. I know it looks like a throwback to 2 years ago when we were in the height of everything, but it's not. It is 2023, but COVID's still a thing. And I want to be super careful and not infect anybody. So we're doing this from home. But I have to tell you, there's some advantages because I get to wear the earbuds to be things. And I once again was hearing in high definition our opening to the show. And I just have to give a shout out that we commissioned that whole opening and the music that is a part of our show. We worked in conjunction with the folks over at 𝗃𝗵𝗲𝗃𝗃, and all of the people who worked on that who were paid were individuals who are on the autism spectrum. And I hear it and I hear that, the bass guitar in there, and I just get excited because it's good stuff. And I love that, knowing that we help support artists on the autism spectrum. If you need work done, you guys, you need some music, you need some video, and they did the animation too. I'm just telling you, you should go over to 𝗃𝗵𝗲𝗃𝗃 and hire those folks because they're really wonderful. Okay, we got a big show, a lot of things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to, first of all, welcome all of you, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you, and I hope that you are all well. We're doing okay. We're holding the fort. Hopefully, I'm not going to cough much during this live show, but if I do, everybody just forgive me. Had to do this because I love Dr. Baker so much. And you'll understand why after you hear him talk for 5 minutes. You'll get it completely. But we are live right now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. Our fabulous 𝗃𝗏𝗧 is going to show you some of the different ways that you can connect and that you can be writing in. I can see your messages in real time. If you write it on whatever platform you're on, you could be on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, really any of those sites, and I'll be able to respond and ask questions of Dr. Baker in just a few minutes. So there's that. But then later on, this show will podcast. It'll be available wherever you get your, wherever you download podcasts. It's a free download. And it's also will be available if you haven't already downloaded the Autism Live app. Hello, it's free to you to download the app. So I encourage you to do that. You can get that at the Apple store, or you can get that on the Google store, download the app, and then, you'll have the videos all the time on your phone and just, be able to watch things. It's cool. I do want to say that when the show podcasts, it podcasts in a couple of different ways. When it goes, it will live on YouTube with the video and the audio. So if you want to see me as I'm making my faces, you want to see Dr. Baker as he's explaining things, because he is the soul of patience. Oh my goodness, a saint walking this earth. Then watch us on YouTube and you'll get to see the graphics and all of those things. But I know that many of you take your podcasts and you listen to them. And so if you want just the audio portion, you're doing that any place else where you get Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasts, do that. I do want to say to you, though, that there are ads now that run, like all podcasts. We have ads that run. That's what keeps the lights on at the studio, not at my house. But, it's one of those things, and we're deeply appreciative of our sponsors. And so we hope that you'll support us in that, because that's what makes it so that we don't charge you. However, some of you have written in and said, hey, but, I would be happy to pay to not have to listen to the ads. Well, you can do that as well. If you go to glow.fm/autism live, you can pay a very small amount. It's $5 a month, or it's even cheaper if you buy it for the year. We really prefer it if you buy it for the year because it's cheaper for us. They charge us a charge every time they run, not Glow, but another company, Stripe, charges us every time we run your credit card. So we'd rather you do it. We give you a discount because that helps us out if you buy it for the year. It's a really low cost. So we hope that if you don't want the ads, if that's something that you can afford, that helps to support us and it makes it so that you don't have to listen to the ads. However, for the rest of you who are like, listen, I love this and I love that this is free information, we appreciate that you are listening to the ads and doing that. Susie B just got the app. Yay! It's a wonderful thing. And guess what? Now there's about to be an Ask Dr. Doreen app too. So in a couple of weeks, you're going to want to get that as well. But we love it when you guys subscribe to us and wherever you like to get, like if you're listening to the podcast and you want to just do it that way, but please subscribe, like, share, because that helps us to keep our costs down because we don't want to spend money on marketing, but we want to help to get information and inspiration to people that need it. Make sense? I love that you're on this journey with me. You know, we always hold hands and we say, cie_¿/puede, we can do this together. Okay. But I do want to say we're going to do jargon of the day. And then we are going to welcome our guest, Dr. Jed Baker, who is amazing and amazing at so many different things. If you're interested in social skills, we got you because we have Dr. Jed Baker and he's got a 20th anniversary of his book that changed everything 20 years ago. And now he's changing it up again. Whoa. Too cool. But also, I love his many books, especially his book, Overcoming Anxiety in Teens and Adults. If you have a teen, it's required reading. Just going to say. Okay. So, but first we have our jargon of the day. That is our Wednesday jam when we have guests. So, and here's the whole point of doing the jargon of the day. What we want to do is save you time, energy, and money. Jargon can be a thing that distances people from the thing that they're trying to learn, right? It can be the thing that makes you feel like maybe you're not smart enough to understand what's happening. And that's not the case. You are absolutely 100% smart enough. But jargon is there for a reason because it's very specific and it helps people to know what we're talking about with fewer words. That's all I want you to think of jargon as. But if you can't access what it means, it does feel like this barrier that makes you feel less than. And I don't want that for anybody. I certainly felt that way. I don't want that for you. So this is why we do jargon, to help you to be able to understand it and implement it in your life and be there with the experts when they start talking about something and go, hey, I know exactly what you're talking about. If you don't understand it the first time you hear the explanation, don't panic. It just might not be your time. You want to hear it again and again. And then what happens is when it comes up in your life, either with you or with the individuals that you love on the spectrum, all of a sudden you'll see it and you'll go, oh, that's that thing that Shannon was talking about. So hi, 𝗟𝗏𝗃𝗲, I don't know. But anyway, what's up? Thrilled that you're here. So let's take a look at what our jargon of the day is, because it's a goodie. It's one of those things that you're going to start to hear, especially as your kiddo gets a little bit older, that I used to look at it and go, what the heck is that? So our jargon term for today is executive functions. I know you've heard this before. I know that it's a term that has come up, and hopefully it comes up often in school. I have had the experience of being at a school and talking about it during my son's IEP and having everybody's eyes wax over. And I was like, uh-oh, they don't know what I'm talking about. And then once I explained it to them, they knew what I was talking about. They just didn't know that this was the term for it. But here's what was nice. Then we could all use the word executive functions and the phrase executive functions, and then we would all know what we were talking about, because this is dense. This is dense stuff. So let's take a look at what our actual definition for executive functions. Doesn't it sound like, something that happens in the executive washroom? No. Executive functions, this refers to mental skills of working memory, cognitive flexibility, and inhibitory control. I don't even know how to pronounce that word. And this is the definition from dictionary.com, which often is very helpful, but not today. So if you don't know what executive functions are, you may not know what working memory is. You may not know what cognitive flexibility is, and I don't even know how to say that word. Inhibitory? I don't know. And what the heck is that? And why would that be useful to my 7-year-old, my 14-year-old, to me? Like what? Why do we have these terms? Because once I explain it to you, you're going to go, oh, totally get it. Okay, let's move on to our working definition and take a look. And then I'm going to really hone this down for you and explain this the way it was explained to me that I went, aha. This is executive functions is being able to use many skills to identify a goal, plan for it, and adapt accordingly in order to achieve the goal. So executive functions is kind of like when you put the whole thing together. And you have to have many different skills to be able to put the whole thing together. So here's how this was explained to me. And I have to give credit where credit is due. Dr. Adele, I had a lot of people try to explain executive functions to me. But the day that I went, nope, I totally get it, was when I was talking to Dr. Adele 𝗏𝗏𝗧. And she said, okay, Shannon, imagine that there's a conference that's coming up for autism and it's something that you really want to go to and you've never gone. Sound familiar? Do any of you want to get to a conference sometime? Can I tell you there's a really good one coming up? The 𝗃𝗏𝗧 conference is happening in Orange County in October. I believe it's the 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Don't trust me. Go to 𝗃𝗏𝗓𝗏now.org and check it out. Temple Grandin is the keynote speaker, and I'm also on the speaking docket. It's going to be 3 days. It's 2.5 days of big fun with Temple, and I'm going to be there, and a whole bunch of other people are going to be there. So if there was any conference you were going to want to get to, that would be the one, I would think. And if you live in California, the regional center will pay for you to go. What? Yeah. So let's imagine that you want to go to this conference. Okay. In order for it's August and the conference is in October, and there's a whole lot of skills that you need to use in order to be there and arrive at the conference and be rested enough and prepared enough so that when Temple Grandin speaks on Saturday morning, that you're there and able to be there, right? Think about all the hoops that you have to jump through in order to get there. First of all, you have to remember, wait, Shannon said if I live in California, that I can get it vendored through the regional center. So you have to remember that, right? And maybe you need to use a memory skill like taking a note, putting a Post-it on the door, something like that. Those are all skills. You didn't come out of the womb with that kind of stuff, right? You had to learn, I'm the kind of person that if I just try to remember it, not going to happen. So I'm going to use memory devices to help me to remember. First step is that I got to reach out to the regional center and see what I have to do to get the free thing to be able to go, right? But you could do that. You could remember to do all of that and have the regional say, yep, you have your free ticket, here it is, and then still not get there, right? Because what else has to happen before you can go to the conference? Well, you have to figure out all the different things that are going to happen for your child. Because what are they just, this was always the thing that stopped me from going to conference. Where's my child? What's he doing? Is he learning? And who is with him that's supporting him that I trust with his life and my life? Because he is my life, right? So you got to jump through that hoop. You got to use all your cognitive skills, your problem solving skills. You got to use social skills to be able to call a friend and say, hey, is there any way I'll trade you? I'll watch your child for a weekend if you'll watch my child for a weekend. But then you realize, the conference is on a Friday. There's a spanner in the whole works. Sometimes we just stop and we go, that's it, I can't go. But executive functions is when you go, all right, I've arrived at a problem. How am I going to fix it? Okay, what if I could get somebody to take him to school on Friday, pick him up from school on Friday, and take him to my friend's house, and now he's there, and I can have them all check in along the way on their phone so that I know that everything went well. That's problem-solving skills, right? But even then, there's a whole bunch of other things that could happen on the morning that you're supposed to leave, because you got to be there bright and early on Friday morning. And maybe it's a 2-hour drive, or you have to drive an hour to the airport. And then you have to be there in enough hours to get your baggage checked, right? You got to be thinking backwards to achieve the goal. That's another level of cognitive flexibility, that you're not just thinking forward, you're thinking backwards. Oh, the plane takes off at noon. That means that I have to be there an hour and a half before, which means that I got to leave here at this time, right? And a lot of people nobody came out of the womb with that, right? We have to teach that skill and teach how to use it, when to use it, right? But still there's more, because you have to get your suitcase packed and you have to figure out what needs to be in the suitcase. Maybe you need to cook meals for the people at home. There's a ton of stuff that has to get done in order for you to successfully get there. And raise your hand if you have ever, like, there's been something that you wanted to do and you thought that you had it all together and then one thing threw you off. For me, often it's a phone call. I've got everything ready. The car is packed. The phone rings. And I stand there and I go, oh no, if I answer this phone call, I'm going to be late. And what do? I try not to now because I've learned this, but I'll go over and go, hello. And then it's somebody who really needs me, right? And now I'm trying to get them to transfer to my cell phone so that I can move to the car. And I end up being late. So that I can't even say the word, that it's inhibition, teaching. And whenever I hear inhibition, I think, oh, that means not taking your clothes off. It means so much more than that. It means that you have the cognitive ability to say, okay, the phone is ringing. I have a choice. I can pay attention to the phone, or I can decide that I'm not going to pay attention to the phone. So I inhibit my response to the phone, and I'm not going to pay attention to the phone, and I'm going to trust that it's going to go to voicemail, and that I can, check the voicemail or have my husband check the voicemail, and I can look into it later, and I hope that it's not an emergency. And my head starts to go, it might be an emergency, and I go, I made a deal with myself that I'm going to this conference and I'm not going to be late, and I get in the car. Sometimes our kiddos think about, they want to have a play date, but there's so many things that can go wrong, little tiny things that can prevent them from getting to their goal. So what we want to do when we teach executive function skills, we teach somebody, first of all, pick a goal, let's care about it, and let's figure out the way that you can achieve the goal. Then when they see, oh, I'm capable, then we're also going to work on things that are kind of less reinforcing for them. Because I used to teach 7th grade English. And let me tell you, every day I would go in there and I would teach my students executive function skills, because otherwise nobody would ever turn in their homework because they didn't have that skill. And I would go in and I would teach them how to use a planner. And I would say, okay, everybody take out your planner. And in your planner, I want you to write down that on October 5th, this assignment is due. And then I want you to go backwards, and I want you to go to September 23rd. And that's where I want you to hand your rough draft in. And now I want you to go backwards in your planner, and I want you to go to September 10th. And that's the day that you got to have your brainstorm in, right? And we would work backwards. And I would teach that to them over and over and over again. Then I would teach them, how do you remind yourself to put my work in the backpack, and how do I put it in a folder so that it's nice? Because my goal is that I want to get an A, right? Or my goal is that I just want to get it done, whatever the goal is for the individual. And I would teach that to them. The thing that's amazing to me is that all these business executives in the last 20 years, they hire coaches, right? And they have coaches come in, and all the coaches do is look at what the goal is that they wanted to achieve, and they look at where it's falling apart, because you can do 85 things right, but if you don't get the 5 things that are right, you don't get to your goal, and then it's not reinforcing, and that's when people don't follow through anymore. So there are all these business coaches that help people to get their executive functions honed. So ask yourself this: why wouldn't we do this for our kids? Why wouldn't we, I'm always talking about packing their backpack. Why wouldn't we pack their backpack with all of the things? So when you're in an IEP, and sometimes, they'll talk about, oh, well, your child isn't doing this or whatever. I'm always looking for where, especially with older kids, where are the executive functions falling apart. And the truth is that you can ask for an executive function aid in an IEP. I know I just blew some people's minds, but in fact, in junior high, I love having an executive function aid in junior high. But you can have one in high school, and you can have one in college. Sometimes there are note takers so that help make sure that your student is a good job. But there's so many skills that you can be helping to teach someone so that they can achieve their goal. But we really want to help someone it's got to be personal. That's what I want to say about this. When you start out teaching executive function skills, start out small and start out with something that's really meaningful to them, something that they want to do, and have them help you plan it. And when an issue comes up during the planning, say to them, we've got an issue. Does this mean we don't go? Or what can we do? Let's brainstorm for a second, make it exciting for them. Say, okay, let's think about, could we do this, and propose things and have them help you to work through. That builds that flexibility. So that's what executive functions are about. Everyone needs executive functions, and no one that I know is perfect at executive functions, because stuff always happens, right? And some of it comes down to our ability to plan. Some of it comes down to our ability to inhibit our responses to things. And some of it comes down to being able to problem solve. And even then, some of it comes down to sometimes your goal changes along the way, and being able to have that flexibility to say, you know what, I thought I wanted that, but I see how much work it is, and I don't want that anymore. So now I'm going to switch my goal to something else. Whew, that's advanced level stuff. But we can begin to teach all of these things to individuals to help them to be able to achieve their goals. Okay. That's what I want to say about that, because our guest is here and I'm very excited. I don't know if he knows this, but I am one of his biggest fans for so many reasons. But because, in life, you meet people and people always say, oh, don't meet your heroes because they'll disappoint you. Let me just tell you, I don't think that's right, because I have met some of my heroes and they have not disappointed. And Dr. Jed Baker is one of those people. I was just talking with my son this morning because I was having him print out the stuff I needed, the things that we're going to talk about. And I said, oh, you know who I'm having on the show? You might remember him because years ago we did an interview and it was a very stressful day. And we were doing interviews up in a really cool room and at the top of a church where it was like, I don't even know what they call it, but it was where they hung all the robes for the choir. And at the end of a long day, Dr. Jed Baker was like our last interview, and my son was with me, and I don't know, he might have been 10, 11, but he was done for the day. And he was just having a really hard time. And Dr. Baker, I started interviewing him and my son was interrupting, and I was not being a good parent. I was not having the patience. And I was like, can you please just let me have 15 more minutes, and not using any of my training at all, but just trying to ask him to like grow up and get over himself, which, bad parenting. But Dr. Baker was like, hey, can we just stop for a minute, and sat and played with my child. So when I talk about somebody who's a real deal, and the things that he shares, oh my goodness. So let's talk about him a little bit. He's the director of Social Skills Training Project, an organization serving the autism community. Brilliant, wonderful. He graduated 𝗃𝗵𝗃𝗲 from SUNY Binghamton and went on to receive the Presidential Fellowship from SUNY Albany, where he completed his doctorate in clinical psychology. Do you guys know what SUNY is? SUNY is the State University of New York. I'm a SUNY baby. My dad worked for SUNY Albany, and I graduated from SUNY Oswego and then went back to teach at SUNY Oswego. So I love the SUNY system. It's an amazing system, and love that he is a part of that and that we share that. Dr. Baker, he writes, he lectures, he provides training internationally on the topic of social skills training and managing challenging behaviors. He is the author of so many award-winning books, and I could go through all of them, but I will tell you, go check out his page at Future Horizons. Today in particular, we're going to be talking about the 20th anniversary edition of his social skills training book, subtitled For Children and Adolescents with Autism and Social Communication Differences. But I want to also say to you, some of my favorites of his books, you really, if you don't have No More Meltdowns, Positive Strategies for Managing and Preventing Out of Control Behavior, you got to get it on your bookshelf. And the other one that I think is required reading, especially if you have a teen on the spectrum, is Overcoming Anxiety in Children and Teens. I can never remember that title, but it is the definitive book for me whenever somebody tells me that they have a child or a teen that is dealing with anxiety. That is the book that I tell them to get. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at the Future Horizon. It's a very inexpensive book. It's like the best. It's probably $11, best $11 you will ever spend. There's that. And you probably have seen him because he's been featured on ABC World News, Nightline, the CBS Early Show, and the Discovery Health Channel. And exciting for me that we have had him before on Autism Live, and we will have him whenever he is available. Dr. Baker, are you with us?
I am. Are you able to hear me okay?
I can hear you fabulously. Thank you so much for being here. And my goodness, thank you for the work that you have done and continue to do in this field. So let's start from the question. You had this book that you put out 20 years ago that was amazing. And it was like the definitive social skills book. And it was a pathway for all of us. And now it's 20 years later and you've put out a new book, the 20th edition of it. And there are some changes. So tell our audience what is different in this book.
Right. So I was saying before when I think we broke up is that we're really sort of about teaching kids and not just skills here. Initially, people saw it as a skill curriculum, and it still is. It's 92 skill lessons. It's a library of skills. But the chapters that precede all those lessons really lay out, based on outcome research and our clinical works, or what works. What are the sort of key issues that you have to identify to be effective in social skills training? And what I was also saying is some of the focus of what we're working on, we sort of have emphasized a lot of emotional regulation skills, kind of similar to, if you will, a little bit of the executive control jargon you were talking about earlier, which is that, people need to have some level of self-control and emotional regulation to use their forebrains and not be the Incredible Hulk. You can't, be a thoughtful, skillful person as the Incredible Hulk. The Hulk only sort of, Hulk smash, Hulk run, Hulk hide. But Hulk doesn't do a lot of let me think about problem solving and what I should do to deal with this. And so you have to be, deal with that kind of stuff. So, that's a little bit about what's going on, in the book. And a huge part of that, what we know about the outcome research, is that people didn't pay a lot of attention to, how do you get a client, a student, a kid, a young adult on board? How do you motivate people?
Yeah.
And then if you teach a skill, how do you get them to use it in the real deal situation? How do you generalize skills? How do people sort of use it in their daily lives? So I think the book does a much better job of laying out very clearly, how do we get people on board in a collaborative way, respect sort of their style for how they want to deal with challenges, and then how do we make sure people remember to use the skills when they need it?
Yeah, I'm going to say that I think this is a particular strong suit of yours, this whole motivation piece and looking at the individual and looking at the motivation. And I was just saying about your overcoming anxiety in children and teens, that this is a large portion of that book too. And it resonated so big with me, this whole idea of if somebody doesn't understand that they can feel better, why would they be even interested in it? But I feel like you not only have cracked the code of how to motivate somebody, but you've also cracked the code of how to teach other people how to motivate. So what do you want to talk to us about? What have you discovered? What do you teach people? Give us a couple of tips.
Okay. Well, there's a lot there. I mean, maybe first, if it's okay, I can lay out what some of the key components of skills training are that we kind of lay out in the book. Yeah. And then let's go back and focus in on motivation. But motivation, it all starts there. So we've got to kind of win people over. So let me table that for a second.
Okay.
But that's the first step. How do we kind of work with people? But then we have to target what's relevant. You can't just, when we first started teaching social skills, I was with a bunch of researchers at Rutgers, and we were sort of laying out, okay, what are social skills? And we realized it's everything that could have a social impact. And you can't have a curriculum on everything. So we have to figure out what's relevant to target. So we ask very practical questions. What might that individual be doing too much of or too little of in sort of a daily way that might interfere for them socially? What's practical to work on? And it's not always coming from a book, right? I mean, it might be that kid, we were sending out all these social skills, and maybe we had a kid who had his finger up his nose, and that's why people weren't interacting with him. So we better target that. So what are they doing too much of or too little of on a daily basis? Let's target relevant skills. And then we have to consider the environment. It's not just about teaching skills, but, what if a kid has sensory issues? Maybe they're not going to be willing to play soccer out in the recess, field at school. It's too overwhelming from a sensory point of view. They might be more willing to interact with people in a game format in a quiet, more contained setting. So we have to think about the modifications that allow people to sort of use skills. And then the next thing is we've got to sort of teach skills in a way that's relevant for a kid's language functioning. Most of the skill lessons in this particular book are geared for kids who have some level of language, what we would now call sort of level 1 or level 2 autism. Level 3 autism often refers to kids who have very limited language functioning, and they're going to need much more of a sort of physical prompting and visual approaches and a different way of teaching. You can't just explain things with words, right? Because they may not understand that. And then the next thing is we've got to, besides figure out the way to teach it initially, got to figure out how to generalize skills. And so I'm a musician too, or at least I try to be. Been doing a ton of digging. And how do you learn music? You look at the sheet music and you listen to the music before you play it, okay? And then you go and play it with people. And then, before you play it again, you look at the music again. And there comes a point where you've now memorized it. You throw away the music. You don't need it anymore. But in the learning process, you probably need to listen to the tune and look at the music many times before you go play it by ear. And, of course, when you play it by ear, that's when music really happens. You're interacting in an improvisational way. Social skills are the same thing. They come more naturally when you can throw away the music. But you have to get to a point, you first have to have somebody showing you the music, not after the fact. Yeah. Oh, you should have done this differently, but beforehand. So when we think about generalizing skills, we have cue cards. We have iPhone apps that pop up with the skill on it. We have other ways that we're systematically reminding people of what to do before they're in that situation, until they don't need that anymore because now they've got it memorized. Okay, so that's generalization. And then the other piece of it is you've got to sort of target the peer community. That's another key component, because we can't spend all of our efforts just trying to get kids to sort of act like everybody else. No, you've got to get everybody else to be accepting and understanding and engaging of our students as well. And so it's a two-way street. So part of skills training is also targeting the peer community to be accepting, and engaging of our students. And lastly, you kind of need a way to know whether any of this stuff works. You have to figure out how to measure progress. And for that, observing actual behavior is probably the most objective way to do it. What people don't realize, and very user-friendly in a school, is just getting a rating. How well is this kid doing this new skill? Rate them from 1 to 5. Those are those are valid measures of social competence, because your social competence isn't about necessarily the actual behavior you engage in, but it's like how you're perceived by others. If people feel like, I'm chill with you, I'm good with you, you're doing the right thing, then you're doing well socially. Even if you maybe talked about washing machines consistently during that time. If the other kid likes washing machines, it'll work, So the issue becomes how people perceive you. So that's an easy thing to do in school, is to get those ratings. We don't always have to, do the very sort of effortful observational data and all of that. We need that. That's objective, but sometimes just a rating is good. So those are the key components. But Shannon, I think motivation is the hardest part of that.
Yeah.
And if you want to, I speak to that a little bit.
Yes, I would love it, because I do think that this is a particular, I think you're so good at so many things, but I think this is a particular strength of yours to help us to all understand that you can motivate someone and how you might do it. So talk to us.
Yeah. So, first of all, let me just set the scenario. A kid walks into my office and the mom and dad are concerned about what the kid's doing, but the kid might not be concerned about what they're doing. And so now I've got motivated parent or motivated teacher, and the kid's like, I don't care about that. I don't want to work on that. And so now where are we? So first of all, I think anybody in that situation who's been told, hey, you're not doing something right, or something, their self-esteem has been already threatened. So the last thing they need from me is to focus on some problem that has to be fixed. So the first thing we do with all of our clientele, from age 3 to 88 is the age range that I've seen in my clinic. Mm-hmm. is talk about people's strengths and abilities and talents. And with less verbal kids, we make sure the team knows about that person's strengths and talents and abilities. And it's because it's the strengths that take you places in life, right? And so you can't just focus on challenges. You got to focus on what they're doing well or what they're developing that can take them places. And so we make a long list of all those good things and a much shorter list of challenges that are identified as things you just simply don't want to be in the way of your strengths. Challenges don't become our focus. They just become a thing of like, okay, don't let that get in the way of the fact that you're a wonderful, artist and you know everything about Disney characters and, and you can draw about that and decorate cakes about that. And I have a client like that who's gotten a job decorating cakes with Disney characters and such.
Wonderful.
And so that's the first order of business is people need to feel good about themselves. And when they're encouraged, they're more willing to work on challenges. I know that from trying to be a mediocre musician, which is that when I have a teacher who says something positive about my playing, it encourages me to practice. But when they say every time I go in, nope, that's wrong, do it this way, eventually I just want to quit, So the second thing is that as a clinician, what do? We solve problems. People come in, there's a challenge in their life, whatever it is, and we're problem solvers. Well, you can't solve the problem for the kid. You have to solve a problem with the kid or with a young adult. And so I like Ross Greene's collaborative problem-solving approach. It's something that we've always done in therapy, but he's articulated it well. So some of you may know some of his work, Ross Greene's work. So I've adopted some of his language to just make clear how we develop a collaborative approach with kids. And it's basic therapy of saying, hey, I noticed there was such and such problem going on, like you're not playing with anybody at recess or talking with anybody at lunch. Hey, what's up with that? What's going on? And we kind of dig in to get the child's perspective when we find out, that some kids have teased him or he's not interested in the games that they're playing or whatever it might be. And then once we understand the kid's perspective, we invite that kid to maybe solve that problem. Gee, I wonder if there's something, that you would want to do at recess with other kids, and get their perspective. So part of our initial targeting of skills comes from the child's point of view or the young adult's point of view as to what the problem is and how to solve it. And then they have skin in the game. It's not just some adult telling them, here's what you got to do. You're doing that wrong. This is what you should do. It's more like, well, what do we want to do to kind of fix that? So I think that's key. And then the other thing also is, the idea of intrinsic motivation, which is people may not want to socialize if you're, let's say it's an elementary school kid. If they're playing soccer, maybe that's not what the kid wants to do. But if the kid maybe is fascinated by every animal and you decide to play the animal guessing game, now there's more motivation to interact with peers because you're doing something that sort of interests them, that provides some intrinsic pleasure. And so, traditionally we think about motivation as providing an external reward. Hey, play with these people and then we'll give you a reward. We'll give you a snack,
Yeah.
But intrinsic pleasure is like, instead of like rewarding you for playing a game that you don't really want to play, how about we play a game you really do want to play? So it's built in. And I think about that with conversation. If I'm building conversation skills, years ago, one of my first groups, it was very hard to get them to kind of talk with each other. There were like 5 different separate conversations going on, or monologues. But they were fascinated by the fact that years ago, Mike Tyson had bit Evander Holyfield's ear off in a prize fight. And so we started to do a pretend interview with Mike Tyson, and they were very focused and very motivated to learn conversation skills around that topic, and then eventually other topics that interest them.
You're a genius.
Pardon?
You're a genius.
No, not a genius. I'm just taking what other people did. The Kegels, Robert Kegel and Kegel, they've looked at this research. If you group kids around their interests,
yeah.
Sometimes skills develop rather organically without direct instruction. So where I used to call what I did in school social skill groups, I don't really like to do an official social skill group. I'd rather do a cooking group, a film group, a Japanese anime group, a gaming group. We do groups around people's interests. Now you have motivated participants who want to interact to do the thing they love, which is sort of naturally how we make friends anyway.
Absolutely. And of course, the Kegels discovered that also made those kids more bully proof. That when they had other kids that had like interests, they were less likely to be bullied, which I love. Unfortunately, we're getting close to being out of time, but I want to talk about, because you have so much experience in this level and people talk about teaching individuals, but when it comes to autism, there are some special things that have to be considered. What do you think, as you look at it, what are the different areas that you think need to be addressed when you're working with someone on the autism spectrum?
Right. So in writing this book, I have to have a sort of library of skills. I have to have some idea of what skill lessons might be useful. Yeah. But remember, all of it's going to be individualized. There may be skills that kids need that aren't in my book because it comes out of that collaborative problem solving. We're going to work on an issue. But these are the areas that I see come up over and over again. In general, emotional regulation. And there's two sides to that coin. People who, when threatened, become rageful and angry and frustrated. So you give me hard work to do, or I have to wait and I can't get what I want initially. There's a sensory overload. I might get angry and rage and melt down. And the other side of being threatened is that we can sort of retreat and go inward and become anxious or depressed. And so there's a lot of skills in this book on understanding your alarm reaction, that Incredible Hulk that comes out when we're threatened. And the Incredible Hulk can be rageful, or the Incredible Hulk can become anxious, depressed, and despondent. Either way, it's an emotional hijacking. And so we need to educate kids around that issue about their emotionality and how to sort of calm the Incredible Hulk, and how not a lot of problem solving can occur while you're the Incredible Hulk. So we have to do some distraction and soothing and calming until we get to a place where then we can work on those skills. So, there's chapters on OCD and social anxiety and anger management and frustration management with difficult work and accepting no for an answer and dealing with losing and handling mistakes and all the things that can sort of dysregulate folks. The other areas are sort of verbal and nonverbal communication. How do we communicate with people, right? And so there's both of those issues. There's a lot that happens without words that we communicate by, reading people's sign. Are they interested in what I'm saying or not interested? Am I going on, beyond their interest? Is Shannon thinking we got to wrap it up, Jed? Hurry up. And then all the sort of conversation skills that they need. There's play and group interaction skills. So for little kids, it's play, but for young adults, it becomes group interaction. A lot of the same skills. How do we sort of co-create? How do we problem solve together? How do we sort of compromise and take turns, and all of those kinds of things? And then there's sort of the kind of empathic communication that occurs with friendships. Like, friends support each other. Friends say uplifting things, not insulting things. How do we talk in a way that's empathically supportive so that we develop friendships, which is also a basis for maybe romantic relationships? Mm-hmm. Some of those same skills of how we're supportive, emotionally connected, can lead to sort of, some of the dating skills. So we talk about that in the book. Conflict management. It's inevitable. If you're interacting with other human beings, you're going to disagree. You're going to have conflict. How do we respectfully resolve conflict? It's not that you have to avoid conflict. It's inevitable. But how do you sort of respectfully talk about it, use I message, and be assertive, not aggressive, to resolve that? And then I think dealing with emergencies and emergency management are another sort of important skills. I've gotten sort of kids who don't necessarily differentiate between sort of life and death emergencies and frustration. So they're calling 911 when they lose their iPhone, and that's probably not what mom wants you to do. So there's some information there about what to do with real emergencies versus sort of non-life-threatening emergencies where you ask a trusted friend or parent. So those are some of the things that some Amazing. Of the skill lessons.
I do want to say that, for anybody who's watching this live or recorded later on podcast, the book is available now, is it not? The 20th anniversary edition?
Well,
it's coming out.
I've got my copy here. So it's out of the printer and it's in Amazon's hands. And so right now it's showing that August 1st it's available, but they have a date that it's not delivered till September. But I think that's going to change, because if I have it, they're going to have it in a week, and then I think they're going to send it out. So it's available now. It's out.
Pre-order it right now, you guys, because it's going to be an amazing book. You've mentioned emotional regulation many times, and I think that this is a really important concept that everybody says we want this for our kids, right? But a lot of us don't know where to start. How do you tackle working on emotional regulation?
Yeah. So first off, I mean, like I said, when you're the Incredible Hulk, there's not a lot of problem solving that occurs.
Yeah.
So the first step is really educating kids and their families about how our emotions work. We have an alarm system, just like in your house. When the alarm goes off, it goes off, and it can make us angry, or it can make us really anxious and avoidant and want to run away, right? When people understand the alarm reaction, they can begin to develop the concept that they have true and false alarms. And so sometimes our alarm goes off, but it's a false alarm. It's not really a life-threatening danger. And so you can begin to learn to override that. Just like if you have a sensitive alarm system in your house that kind of goes off, because we had the alarm go off because my son was cooking the other day and was smoking. There was no fire in the house. It just went off. So what do? We overrided the alarm system. We pressed the button to stop it. And so we can learn to do that. But you first have to have that insight that when you have this rush of panic, could be a false alarm. So what am I going to do about that? How do I turn down the volume of that? So we talk about ways to sort of regulate yourself through calming activities. It could be for some kids some kind of repetitive activity. It depends on the kid. For me in my life, it's always been drumming and playing basketball, physical things that I do. But I have other kids who just listen to a particular episode of Seinfeld, boom, and they pop out of it. The Pigman episode in particular, that Kramer was once the Pigman, and that breaks up one of my kids, and boom, he's right out of that, calms down. But those are just emergency management tools. Ultimately, to get ahead of these sort of meltdown moments, what we want in kids and families and teachers to do is learn the predictable triggers to those difficult moments of false alarms. Learn the triggers, because then not only do you have ways to calm down, turn the volume down on that emotionality, but you can get ahead of it. And so we try to lay out in the No More Meltdown book, and then again in this new book, the Social Skill Training book, common triggers like demanding difficult work, sensory overload, having to wait or not get what you want immediately, not getting the attention that you might want from people. And sometimes internal triggers like illness. Like I know seasonal allergies. Every spring, I'm more irritable. Knowing that helps me to sort of not become so irritable, because I know, okay, it's not really this person who's bugging me. I'm tired and cranky because I got allergy. So these are some of the things. If people can learn the triggers, we can put together a prevention plan. And part of a prevention plan is social skills training. What am I going to think when I don't get what I want immediately? Well, if I'm calm, I'll get more of what I want. Maybe my parents will give me double what I want if I can wait. There's skills that we can teach, but there's also modifications. There's things that parents and teachers can do. So we lay out a chapter in the book on the different kinds of environmental setups and modifications to help people learn that skill. So for accepting no for an answer, waiting, a skill like that. The use of timers is very helpful. It's much easier to wait for what I want when I know exactly how long I have to wait, and I can see the time pass, and I know when the shape shrinks on my visual timer, I'm going to get what I want. Great. Okay, that makes it easier. Same with difficult work. We teach people how to ask for help, teach people Carol Dweck's growth mindset, that you're not stupid if you don't know how to do something. It just means you're about to learn something new. And if you ask for help, you're going to learn it. But it's much easier to do that if somebody has modified the work and not made it impossible for me to do, but within the window of my capability. Or they showed me how to do it first. They're not testing to see what I know until I fail and say, oh, well, that's what you got to learn. No, they taught it first. So there's lots of modifications we can do. So that's how we sort of think about it. There's always two issues. How do you calm in the moment, right? Self-regulating, soothing activities, distraction, Those are our crisis tools. But the bigger issue is how do we get ahead of the sort of regular categories of triggers? And parents will often say, teachers will say, everything sets my kids off. And then when we look at it, there's usually some large predictable categories. And that's what we try to give parents and teachers, a map. And it's just a map. It's not the territory. But it sure is helpful to have a map. So when lots of dysregulated, out of control behavior occurs, I can give parents a map to say, is it this? 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 That's triggering. There's a list of questions they can ask. And depending on what those triggers are, there are some sample prevention plans they can go to. Here's what I should do if it's this. Here's what I should do if it's that.
I just love you so much. Now, I had told you that we would be done by now, we're not. I can stay, but I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have a few more minutes?
No, I have a couple more minutes, and I know we had a late start because of some technical stuff.
Well, that was on our end. So, yeah, we're going to edit that out. But so much has changed in the world since you put out the first book, and not the least of which is how we interact socially.
Wait, I just lost you.
Oh, no. Did you lose me on the phone?
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Say it again. You cut out for a second.
Okay. So I said so much has changed in the last 20 years since you put the book out, not the least of which is how we interact virtually and socially. So can you talk a little bit about that? And especially, I feel like since the pandemic, things have changed again, and there's so much that's happening virtually. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, parents often are so worried that their kids don't interact in person and spend a lot of time interacting on the internet in the sort of social media world and stuff. So I came across just in the last 2 years some interesting research in the ASD world on interacting socially. I'm interacting in social media, interacting on the internet. And so what they found is that compared to sort of non-autistics, autistic individuals tend to spend more time on the internet in a passive way, consuming like YouTube videos. And I'm sure some of that is self-regulatory. I do that, by the way, at night because my wife doesn't want me to watch TV because it's loud. So I just watch YouTube videos until I fall asleep. Anyway, it's passive. I'm not interacting with anybody, right? And what sort of neurotypical people tend to do is we're on the internet all the time, but we're texting each other and we're messaging each other and we're liking and disliking, well, hopefully not disliking, but liking Facebook posts, etc., Instagram, Snapchat, all that stuff. So what they found is that the ASD individuals who spent a little bit more time interacting on the internet in a socially interactive way, like on Facebook, for example, were more satisfied with their lives than the people who were only interacting in the virtual world in a passive way, just sort of with YouTube kind of stuff. And I think there's a huge advantage, and especially sort of during the pandemic and post-pandemic, that the internet sort of opens up a larger world of people with whom we might have common interests with. Where it's hard to do that maybe in your high school or in your elementary school or in a very small setting. But if you're on the internet, and you love Broadway theater, there's a chat group for you, and you're going to meet like-minded people, right? And so I think it opens up lots of possibilities. But just like the in-person world, there's pros and cons. I don't think it's necessarily more dangerous to interact on the internet. In fact, in some ways it's safer because if you do have a predator, at least it's virtual right now. And it's not somebody who's going to grab you in person, but there's pros and cons. So the pros, first of all, are when you're interacting online, you have time to think about your response. And that's really helpful for a lot of folks with ASD who sort of panic in the moment face-to-face and get nervous. Eye contact is threatening. And all of a sudden, if I'm interacting with you face-to-face, I freeze up. My anxiety causes tenseness. I'm not sure what to say. I have time to carefully consider my response in communicating back and forth on the internet. So that's a good thing. right? There are predators that exist out there. So that's something we have to be careful about. I have a book out called sort of No More Victims about cyber safety that lays out some of the sort of safety profiles. I mean, people should have a trusted friend or parent or someone who won't threaten to take their phone away, so that parents and so the kids will keep coming to them, and that parent can sort of help them understand whether that person might be safe or not safe. Shouldn't be meeting strangers in a private area. If you're going to meet up somewhere in person, do it in a public area with a parent nearby, that kind of thing. But look, I think there's a lot of advantages for people to interact socially. And the skills we talk about in the book, are very much the same skills about in person. What do people do in the virtual world? When I want to connect with people, the first thing I do is, if I don't know them, I comment positively on something that they posted. It's the first thing I do. They say something, I really like, right, kind of thing. And then, based on comment, if there's a response, we might sort of see if we like some of the same stuff, whether we like some of the same, like if I'm in that Broadway theater group, do we like some of the same shows and actors? Or if I'm in, the furry community, do we like some of the same characters, kind of thing? And then from there, you want to become an empathic person. So we say supportive things. What we need to be careful about are two things on the internet. Expressing negative content. People use the internet to vent and rage. And what people don't realize is that scares people away. If you're raging about person A, B, and C, well, person D, E, and F are now afraid to interact with you because you might do that about them too. And so save your rage for me, your therapist, your parent, your most trusted friends, but don't post it publicly on the internet is a pretty good rule.
If we could only get you to teach everyone that.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, these are rules. Like, a great supervisor of mine who was working with people with schizophrenia years ago said, people with schizophrenia are just like everybody else, only more so.
Yeah.
And so, these are skills for everybody.
Yeah.
So there's there's the do's and don'ts of what to do and what not to do to express yourself, but there are also skills of how to receive information on the internet. You have to have a thick skin. You know it. You're in the public eye. You're doing these podcasts. You probably get lots of really positive response, and every so often somebody's annoyed with you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And they correct what you said, or they don't like what you. And so we've got to sort of have a way of not taking that personally. Now, a lot of my clientele are in communities where there's a lot of emotionally reactive people. Mm-hmm. And so they need to understand that person may have their own anxiety issues. They might have their own trauma background that informs their response to you. So if they say, you're horrible, what kind of person are you? That may not be because you said something so horrible. That may be because they're incorrectly, or they're misinterpreting what you said, and it's triggering a past trauma for them. And so when we can help our clientele put into context the negative remarks, it's much easier.
Yes.
So, that's part of what comes with, interacting on the internet. There's going to be those naysayers.
Everybody thinks I'm funny because the thing that I will often get when someone doesn't like what I say, they won't take issue with what I say as much as they'll just say, who is this fat, white, old lady? And to my response is, I am all of those things. I'm not disputing any of those things. And so I don't take it personally. And people always find that strange, but I'm like, yes, but so what is the issue that you have with all of those things? And then we're able to have a conversation, and I find that it's much better because the sting out of what they thought that they were assaulting me with something, and that I'm not insulted at all.
Well, certainly your reaction diffuses it by sort of just saying, okay, fine. But you're not really those things. That is the perception of someone who has an axe to grind, and you can always, they find ways to sort of, press your buttons,
Well, none of those press my buttons. But anyway, we move on.
Yeah.
one of the things that I know about you is that throughout your career and your work, you have been really focused on quality of life issues. And as you know, there's such a huge debate right now about, you know, doing strength-based and individually based programs. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, especially in the context of this new book, about where you are in this space and how you think that jives with quality of life.
Oh, thanks for that question. I mean, the book really starts off this whole issue of motivation with that list of people's strengths and talents, because those are the things that take you places in life. So we want to focus on, you know, all that's wonderful about that person, and not just focus on the challenges. The challenges are just sort of not to get in the way of their strengths. When I look at sort of what makes the sort of research on life satisfaction, we often think, you know, what makes people happy, right? There's people who research that, Marty Seligman, all that sort of learned optimism and all of that research. What seems to make people happy are not sort of just hedonistic pleasures, although it's nice to have great food and it's nice to, you know, win the lottery is a cool thing too, right? And have a lot of money and all of that. Those are not the things that ultimately lead to life satisfaction, according to the research. Those are temporary pleasures, hedonistic pleasures. Life satisfaction comes from when people feel they are valued and they play an important role maybe with other living creatures, whether it's humans or it could be animals too, that they know they're needed in some way. We are ultimately social beings. Even if we don't want to socialize all the time because it can be overwhelming and we're very focused on who we'll socialize with, ultimately we still are social human beings. We're embedded in a social context and we want to be valued in that context. So when we think about our clientele or for everybody, how are they going to be valued, right? We want them to be in a school where they feel safe and not teased and bullied and insulted by peers or by teachers who call them out and humiliate them in front of people. We have great teachers out there, and they have to foster that it's okay not to know something. It doesn't mean you're stupid. We don't humiliate people. We have to create those atmospheres where it's okay and safe to learn, right? And we want to create work environments where we're accepting people on the autism spectrum and others with social differences. I've been working with a wonderful company out on Long Island called 𝗃𝗏𝗃, and they've been able to place some of my young adult clients in jobs because their mission has been to get Fortune 500 companies to agree specifically to hire a certain number of people with autism. And it's competitive, that people have to be qualified, but they also understand that they're, you know, how they're evaluating someone is based on their job and not necessarily how wonderful they interview, you know. And they're looking at their assets and their strengths for the particular job. And so I'm happy to see more of that evolve, and we need more of that kind of thing where people are committed to hiring someone who's qualified, but maybe on the autism spectrum. I want my clientele to have a full life. And so it means they're going to maybe have a job, a volunteer job, or something that they do where they feel they're needed. That they have some people that they recreate with. They do fun things, shared activities they like doing. I just got off the phone before you, by the way, with a client. And once a month is about all they want to do, but once a month they get together and they either go bowling or they go to Funplex, or they hang out and have pizza. And that's an important part of their life.
Yeah.
I have a 40-year-old client who has done that all his life with this core group. You know, it's once a month they get together and they hang out, and it's really rich and meaningful for them. So to have a work life, to have a recreation life, and maybe if they want, and not everybody wants, everybody's different, a romantic partner. And many people, what that means is someone who they say they're in a relationship with and they never have any physicality with them, and someone else who holding hands is what they want, someone else who wants a full sexual relationship. The key is you have to find someone who's on the same page, otherwise that doesn't work.
Right.
You know, so I want people to have that sort of full life of what they want to do. And I think, being able to have skills like we are trying to teach in the book affords you the opportunity to create that life for yourself in some ways, right? The less skills you have, sometimes other people then make choices for you. But the more skills you have, you get to seek out what you want.
Which is an amazing thing. We had somebody writing a question. Do you have a minute more to answer the question?
Of course, I certainly do.
So the question is, I'll read it. What can I do as someone who has mutism and consistent social cue misunderstanding? I feel like I am in a steep uphill battle financially, and I find it very hard to move up.
And I assume they mean selective mutism, so more of an anxiety issue where they can certainly speak, but they maybe are uncomfortable doing that with people they don't know in particular. I have a client like that for many, many years who will speak with the people that he knows. He's been in group on and off with me for probably 10 years. And so now, but he's somebody who I placed with Integrate. He got a job with someone who specifically understood. By the way, he's a computer programmer. He's a graduate student, got a master's in computer programming. So he's a very skilled guy, but yeah, he's selectively mute. With the right employer, they want to see his portfolio. They want to see what he can perform and do in computer programming, even if he's not the most, prolific talker on the interview. And so I would hope it if 𝗔𝗕𝗢𝗨𝗧 could find those kind of autism-friendly employers who can kind of look past that. I had another client like that. He had to be very pregnant positive, so that if he was asked a question on an interview, it could be 15 seconds before he said anything. And 15 seconds is long when someone asks a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes,
I was going to show you what that felt like.
And I couldn't make it. I had to fill the blank. Yeah. And that is what people do. They feel anxious and feel the need to fill the blank. And so you're right. You continue though.
So I would make a call for that individual and write a letter. We wrote up a script for him. And so, I have a different book, Preparing for Life. Mm-hmm. That book is a book specifically for adults transitioning into jobs and transitioning into adulthood. In that book, we have a script that people use to explain the challenges that they have. So if they go on an interview, they can sort of say, hey, I have selective mutism. Here's what it means. I may be inhibited to talk, but here's what it doesn't mean. I have a high IQ. I'm quite bright. I understand everything you're saying. I have a proven track record of good performance on a job. And so we give them a script that they could say, or that they could hand to the potential employer. So at least you get to explain, because if you can't explain the selective mutism, then people could mistakenly think you're being rude because you're not responding. Right. Or you don't care about the job or something. So we have to explain it.
You are amazing, and thank you. I don't want to keep you any longer, although if it were up to me, I would just talk to you all day long, because I feel like you just have your finger on the pulse of what we need to know, and you explain it in such a wonderful way. So I really want to thank you for your time and all your work and all of your books. I want to remind everybody that the social skills training book, the 20th edition, you can order it now on Amazon. You may not get it till next week, but it's worth ordering it now. I also want to tell you, go to Future Horizons, put in Dr. Jed Baker and order as many of the books as he's talked about here as you can possibly fit into your cart. I think they're almost all available still on Amazon, and they're wonderful books. And, it's almost like Sophie's Choice. Besides the 20th edition, it's like, oh, which one would I tell you to get? But I got to tell you, I think the anxiety book is, if you can only get one more, that's the one I would start with, because I think it's so accessible, Dr. Baker. And I feel like anxiety is such a big part of everybody's journey. And I want to say that, before, and maybe this is what you're going to say, the whole book is not for individuals on the spectrum, but it's useful. And you have a specific chapter that is about individuals on the spectrum. So
that's right. That's right.
I respect and admire you.
Anxiety is 80% of people on the spectrum have a secondary anxiety issue, and in the typical population, the rates are pretty high as well. So yeah, it's a book for everybody. But the chapter that's specific for autism is also for individuals who might have a lot less language functioning. All the chapters are useful for people on and off the spectrum, but there's some specific issues that we have to think about if someone has less language, where you can't explain your alarm system verbally. You can't explain how gradual exposure to overcome fears works. You have to do it without all the verbiage that maybe a youngster who has less receptive language wouldn't understand. So there's a specific chapter on how to work with those kids.
Well, thank you so much for all of those things. I hope you guys will avail yourself of those books because they will enrich your life. And if you have the opportunity to get to a conference where, like a Future Horizon conference where Dr. Baker is speaking, I encourage you to go do that because you will be all the better for having done that. Dr. Baker, thank you so much. And thank you for being patient with us and giving us more of your time today than we intended to. But it's been lovely.
Anytime, Shannon, anytime. I would love to just do Q&A with you guys and your audience. Happy to do that.
All right. I'm gonna reach out to you with dates and let's just do that because that sounds like a great time. All right. Love to you and your family and enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for everything you do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. All right, you guys, we went a little bit over, but wasn't he worth it? Oh my goodness. And thank you so much, 𝗃𝗁𝗦, for writing in. And for giving us an additional question. So you guys, tomorrow it's Stories from the Spectrum, and then we are going to be back on Monday. And let me also tell you that we have Dr. 𝗃𝗊𝗁𝗍 back on Tuesday for Ask Dr. Doreen. So many amazing guests that we've got lined up for the rest of August. You're not going to want to miss it. It's going to be, and we've got some topics to talk about. Some stuff has happened, and you're going to want to know more about it. So make sure that you're tuning in. But we'll be back live on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now. If you found anything helpful in this video, please give us a like. In fact, make sure that you smash that subscribe button on YouTube and give us a like on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Instagram for important updates. And please download our free podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much. See you next time.